Now, if I had to say what all of the new features that have come out in Photoshop have in common, I would have to say it's the ability to work in Photoshop in a non-destructive way. That means that as you're editing, you're not making permanent changes. It used to be that when you worked in Photoshop and you made a change, like you blurred something or whatever, you applied an effect or you applied a color or something, that would be there permanently. And now you're able to go back and edit that at any point in time, and it really gives you a lot of flexibility. So what I want to do is jump in and start talking about some of the different aspects of non-destructive editing.
Baby, baby, video break, baby, baby.
Okay, another quick concept you need to know is the difference between raster and vector. Okay, now my raster, I have a picture of a Rasta. Okay, I thought it would be funny. So you realize that this image is, raster means that it's made up of tiny pixels. So let's zoom in. I'm going to do Control plus here. Oops, Control plus, and we're going to get and move it over. I hit the space bar. So let's get over here to our raster, Rasta. And if you see, you get close enough, you can see that this image is actually made up of tiny little dots, little pixels. Okay? Now on the other hand, let's go over to our vector image. And our vector image is created in a completely different way. It's a shape image. So it's created by the mathematics and geometry and all that fun stuff. So if we click on that, I'm going to go over here, and this little white arrow, this area right here, these two things are basically what you use for vector shapes. So I'm going to click this little arrow over here and click on the image, and now you're going to see all these little points, and they all have their handles. Okay, so this is how a vector image is put together, by a combination of dots and vector paths, and and vector is really something that you do more with Illustrator, but Photoshop has a lot of very powerful vector editing capabilities. But Illustrator is really where, if you want to get into vectors, that's really where you should be. Photoshop just has it to help out with certain things. And if somebody does a logo for you as a raster, as a Rasta, then run away, because they have no idea what they're doing.
Baby, baby, video break, baby, baby.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about smart objects. What is a smart object? Well, okay, let's say I want to bring an image in. I've got this professional image that I've just bought. Now I'm going to import it into my Photoshop document. So here it is. What? That's huge. Oh my gosh. Oops, let's see. That is a gigantic image. That is a huge woman. Okay, so what am I going to do? I'm going to grab this image. I'm going to make a copy just to, keep this here. I'm going to click on this image. I'm going to hit Control T for transform. And I'm going to go way back and see how gigantic this image is. Oh my goodness. Now it's awesome to have great big graphics like this, because it means you're going to have incredibly high resolution to work with, and you can just keep going down and down and down. Okay, so let's make this small. Transform, there you go. Now, okay, here we go. Here is our girl. Great. Now, okay, well, this is kind of big, so let me make it kind of small. I'm going to put it over here and just okay, well, oops, that's too small. Let me just make that big. I'm going to put this over here. Okay, let me make this a little bigger. Okay, now what? Uh-oh. What happened? She looks terrible. Okay, what can we do? What has happened here? Well, when I made this image small, it lost all that information, because it just said, oh, well, I don't want to make this bigger than you need it, so I'm going to make it small. When it went to this size, of course, it looks pretty good for that size. It doesn't look bad, but it lost all that pixel information. So when I made it big again, okay, well, so long, too bad. Now what can we do here? This goes to the entire reason why Photoshop has become non-destructive, okay, getting back to that topic. So what do we do? Let's just get rid of that because it's terrible. And let's go back to our original image. What can we do to make sure that this image is going to stay at this high resolution? Well, we're going to save it as a smart object. And what is a smart object? It's a really awesome thing. Smart object, look, now it's got a little thing here. It means that we're no longer editing this picture. We're not touching the picture. We're touching a reference of another file. Okay, this picture is now stored somewhere else. Okay, the picture is stored somewhere else. Just don't worry where it's stored, but it's stored somewhere else. If you click on it twice, if you go over here and click twice, it'll take you to the actual file. Okay, but now all we're doing is working with the reference file. So if we make it small, let's do Control minus, Control T. Oops, this is such a big picture. Control T. This is not the best way to do this. This is just the way I do it. So it's the best. Okay, now let's make this small again. I'm going to hit Control plus, Control plus, plus, plus. Got all these little helpers on there. Okay, let's do that again. Oops! I made it too small. Well, I guess when I make it big, it's going to have all that, it's going to lose all that information, right? Well, of course, I think you know not. See, now we can make it all big again, and we've still got all that information. Why? Because we're no longer working with the actual file itself. We're just working with a reference file, and we can make it as big or as small as we want to relative to what that original file was. Okay, you obviously can't make it bigger than the original file, but we don't need to. So you always, when you're working with images, the first thing that I do is I stop, working with that image by itself, because you can, if you make it too small, you're stuck. You're not going to be able to make it big again. And now we're good. So there we are.
Baby baby video break baby baby.
Now let's talk about smart filters. We're going to go back in time just a little bit. Do you remember this graphic when I was talking about adjustment layers? Okay, so what is a smart filter and how is it related to smart objects? They're all very smart. We get it. Okay, so let me hit Control. Let me click on the window first and Control plus. Oh, there we go. That's good. And I'm going to hit F and move this over. Smart filters. What are smart filters? Well, I think you can figure that out for yourself, but we're going to show you anyway. Okay, I'm going to take this circle, which is actually a vector circle. We'll talk about that in a second. This is a vector circle. This is a regular circle. That doesn't matter actually in this case. So I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to say convert to smart object. So now this is a smart object, and this is just a regular raster. Remember rasta, circle. This is made up of dots. Even though it looks like a vector, it's not. So if I go over here to my filters and I go to Gaussian blur, I want you to understand something. Gaussian blur is the only blur that you need to know. You don't need all of this junk. Forget about it, okay? When you get into advanced stuff, you can worry about that. But Gaussian blur is one of the top, I would say, 5 filters that you need to know. Maybe not even that many, but just let's say Gaussian blur is the only filter that you need. All right, so let's do Gaussian blur. Click on that and we get this window. And now this orange circle is going to blur. It looks amazing, doesn't it? I love Gaussian blur. Okay, so we can blur that up as much as we want until it almost disappears, blah, blah, blah. Great, we click OK. And this forever and ever and ever and ever is going to be blurry. Now we take our smart object, which we now know is a reference to the actual circle. If we double click on it, we will see the actual circle that it's referencing, but it's a reference that is sitting inside of our layer right now. Okay, so let's go to let's do the exact same thing with the smart object. We'll go up to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and it looks identical. There's nothing that really looks different about these. But there's one big difference. When I click OK, now we have this smart filter down here. What does that mean? That means that this is non-destructive. It's not going to be a permanent change. If we look at this, we can turn it off and turn it on. Click on Gaussian blur. We can blur it more. Hit OK. Do we like that? okay, we want to go back, we want to make it a little less. And there you can see the power of non-destructive editing, okay? That you can always change it, and almost everything now in Photoshop works with that. So you can always just take your circle and blur it, and it will always be blurred forever and ever. If you know that you don't want to ever change it, then go ahead and do that. It'll probably take less RAM. But if you want to start doing things in an advanced way, remember, there's always a non-destructive way to do things.